can't even imagine what Native Americans had to go through to survive in harsh conditions. Native Americans had no fortified forts or steel walls, but for centuries they slept under the open sky, sharing this land with bears and wolves. Their survival depended not on weapons, but on a deep understanding of the world in which man was not the king of nature, but only a part of it. The strength of these peoples lay not in their ability to defeat wild animals, but in their ability to live with them in harmony, avoiding conflict. They read the signs of nature like an open book and knew how to become invisible to even the most sensitive predators. It was an art of coexistence based on respect, knowledge, and incredible observation. Watch this video to the end, and you will learn how choosing a place to spend the night could be more important than any weapon, and what secret allowed them to hear a predator approaching long before it came into view. What if I told you that everything you believed about survival in the wild is not true? For Native Americans, the world was not divided into man and nature. They saw themselves as part of a single living system where every creature, from the mighty bear to man, had its own role and place. This philosophy was the foundation of their safety. They did not seek to dominate or conquer, but rather sought balance and harmony. Predators were not absolute evil to them, but rather powerful neighbors whose habits and strength had to be respected. Therefore, their first line of defense was not physical strength, but deep respect. Indigenous peoples believed that every animal had a spirit, and showing disrespect could bring misfortune. This belief shaped their behavior and forced them to be extremely cautious. They never took more from nature than was necessary for life. Wastefulness was considered an insult to the spirits of the earth and animals. Such thriftiness naturally reduced their impact on the environment. Knowledge was their main shield. They studied animal habits from a very young age, absorbing the stories of their elders and observing tracks on the ground. Understanding where wolves hunted or where bear trails ran was the best defense against unwanted encounters. They saw themselves not as masters, but as guests on this land. This worldview completely changed their approach to safety. Instead of building fortresses, they learned to be sensitive and inconspicuous. This approach was based on preventive measures rather than confrontation. The main task was not to fight off a predator, but to ensure that an encounter with it simply did not happen. This was their main secret. They knew that fear was a poor advisor. Panic could lead to wrong actions. Calmness and confidence based on knowledge allowed them to make the right decisions in critical situations. Their survival was not a struggle, but a skillful dance with nature. They moved to its rhythm, felt its breath, and knew its rules. This allowed them to sleep peacefully where others would not have survived the night. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about this philosophical approach to survival compared to modern methods? Write about it in the comments. Want to know the secret that literally drove away darkness and danger? Fire was the heart of any Native American camp and served many more functions than just heating. At night, it turned into a magical circle of safety that no large predator dared to cross. It wasn't just about animals' instinctive fear of flames. Native peoples perfected the art of fire control. They knew which types of wood burned longer and gave off more heat, and which produced thick, acrid smoke. Smoke was the second important element of protection. Its smell spread over long distances, warning all the inhabitants of the forest in advance of the presence of humans. Most animals, with their keen sense of smell, preferred to avoid such a source of odor. The fire was kept burning all night without exception. For this purpose, guards were assigned, or a special technique of stacking wood, known as a long fire, or nodia, was used. 2 or 3 large logs were stacked on top of each other and smoldered slowly, providing even heat and light for many hours. The location of the fire was also of strategic importance. It was lit on the leeward side of the sleeping quarters. In this way, smoke constantly enveloped the camp, creating an invisible olfactory barrier. Sometimes certain plants were added to the fire. For example, wet conifer branches or bundles of wormwood emitted a particularly strong and pungent odor when burned. This scent was unpleasant to many animals and served as an additional repellent. The size of the flame was also regulated. A fire that was too large could attract unwanted attention from afar, while a small but steady fire was optimal. It provided enough light and heat while remaining relatively inconspicuous from a distance. Fire was also a source of psychological comfort. The steady crackling of the wood and the dancing flames were soothing, creating a feeling of security and comfort in the midst of the wilderness. This allowed people to fully relax and recharge their batteries. In addition, the presence of fire made it possible to quickly cook food and boil water. The smell of cooking food could attract animals, but it was overpowered and masked by the constant smell of smoke. Thus, fire solved several survival problems at once. But fire was only the visible part of their security system. Are you ready to learn about the invisible shield they created with sounds and silence? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of safe overnight stays in the wild. Choosing the right place to camp was a science in itself, on which life itself depended. An experienced person could spend several hours searching for the perfect spot, evaluating dozens of seemingly insignificant factors. The first rule was to avoid animal trails. Native Americans knew how to read the land and could easily identify the routes that large animals regularly traveled. Setting up camp on such a highway was equivalent to spending the night on a busy motorway. They also avoided dense thickets and dense forests. In such places, visibility was limited, and predators had the advantage of surprise. Preference was given to open glades or sparse forests where you could see everything around you. The key factor was the availability of escape routes. Camps were never set up in enclosed spaces, such as narrow canyons or at the foot of steep cliffs. People always had to be able to quickly leave the camp in case of unforeseen danger. Elevation played an important role. A small hill or ledge provided a strategic advantage. The view was better from above, and it was always more difficult and noticeable for a predator to climb uphill. Proximity to water was important, but there were nuances here as well. Camps were never set up on the very bank of a river or at the edge of a lake, as the watering hole was a place of attraction for all the inhabitants of the forest. They chose a place at a certain distance so that they had access to water but did not disturb the animals. The direction of the wind was another critical element. They always tried to position the camp so that the wind blew from known animal trails or habitats towards the campsite. This allowed them to catch the scent of an approaching animal in advance. They carefully examined the ground for tracks and other signs of predator activity. Droppings, scratches on trees, and remains of prey all indicated that the area was already occupied. It was not possible to stay overnight in such a place. The ideal place was considered to be a small, easily visible hill near a source of firewood, not far from water, but away from animal trails. Finding such a combination was not easy and required a great deal of experience. This skill was worth its weight in gold. Thus, the choice of location was not accidental, but the result of a thorough analysis of the terrain. It was an intellectual game with nature in which Native Americans were true grandmasters. They created safety even before they lit a fire. What you are about to learn will make you listen to every sound. For Indigenous peoples, sound was as important a source of information as sight. They knew not only how to listen to the forest, but also how to control the soundscape of their camp, turning it into part of an early warning system. The main rule in the camp was sound discipline. Loud shouting, aimless noise, and sharp sounds were prohibited, especially at night. They understood that any unnatural sound attracts attention and can be perceived by a predator as a challenge or a sign of weakness. They learned to move around the camp almost silently. Smooth, deliberate movements were part of their culture. This reduced the likelihood of accidentally breaking a branch or stumbling and making a loud noise. At the same time, they did not strive for absolute silence. Sometimes monotonous, rhythmic sounds could have a calming effect on the surrounding fauna. For example, a quiet song or measured beats on a small drum signaled that there were confident people here, not frightened prey. Native Americans were masters at imitating the sounds of nature. They could mimic the cries of birds or the voices of animals. These skills were used to communicate over long distances so as not to disturb the natural soundscape of the forest with human speech. But the most important skill was listening. At night around the campfire, they did not engage in loud conversations, but listened carefully to the symphony of the forest. Every sound had its own meaning. The alarm call of a nightbird, the crack of a branch, the sudden silence of cicadas. These were all signs that they knew how to read. They knew that every predator had its own sound signature. An experienced hunter could determine from a barely audible rustle who was making it, a small rodent or a sneaking wolf. This skill had been honed over the years and was vital. For added security, a signal system could be set up around the camp. Dry branches or bundles of bones were hung on the paths leading to the campsite. Anyone who tried to approach unnoticed inevitably made a noise that was immediately picked up by the keen ears of the guard on duty. They understood that the greatest danger was silence. If the forest suddenly fell silent, it was a sure sign that a large predator was nearby, forcing everyone else to hide. Such a ringing silence was the loudest alarm signal. But how did they build their shelters so that they were not only protection from the weather, but also part of this security system? In the next chapter, you will learn how a simple structure made of branches became an impregnable fortress. The temporary shelters of indigenous peoples were models of efficiency and minimalism. They did not build massive structures, but created light and functional dwellings that blended perfectly into the landscape. The main principle was to use materials at hand and be as inconspicuous as possible. One of the most common types of shelters was a simple lean-to. To build it, they found two trees standing close together and secured a thick pole between them at human height. Other thinner poles were leaned against this pole at an angle, creating the frame of a single slope roof. The frame was covered with a thick layer of spruce branches, bark, or woven twigs. The material was laid from bottom to top like tiles so that rainwater could roll off freely. Such a shelter protected from wind and precipitation while remaining open on the side of the fire. Another popular type was the wigwam or teepee, a conical shelter. The frame, made of several long poles, was tied together at the top, and the lower ends were arranged in a circle. This structure was very wind-resistant and easy to assemble and disassemble. The covering for the teepee was made of sewn skins or large pieces of bark. At the bottom around the perimeter, it was pressed down with stones or earth to prevent drafts. A smoke hole was left at the top, the location of which could be adjusted with special poles. In forested areas, they often built so-called wickiups. These were dome-shaped huts made of bent and intertwined young trees. The frame was covered with grass, leaves, bark, or skins, creating a warm and dry shelter. Importantly, these shelters did not disturb the harmony of the surrounding world. They were built from local materials and quickly blended into nature after people left. This was part of the philosophy of minimal impact on the environment. The design of the shelter always took into account the direction of the wind and the location of the fire. The open part of the canopy or the entrance to the teepee always faced the fire. This allowed heat to penetrate inside and illuminate the dwelling. The entrance to the shelter was often made small and low. This helped to keep the heat inside. In addition, to get inside, you had to bend down, which made it difficult for large animals to enter. These simple but ingenious structures were the result of centuries of experience. They provided everything necessary for survival, protection from the elements, warmth, and safety. Their construction did not require complex tools, only a knife, rope, and knowledge of the properties of local plants. What if I told you that the main secret to invisibility to predators is controlling odors? The sense of smell in most predators is hundreds of times more developed than in humans. It was the smell that most often led them to human dwellings, so controlling it was a task of paramount importance. The main source of attractive odors was food. Native Americans never stored food supplies in or near their shelters. A special place was chosen for this purpose, at a considerable distance from the camp. The most reliable method was to hang food in a tree. A bag of supplies was thrown over a high horizontal branch and raised so that even a bear standing on its hind legs could not reach it. This simple rule saved not only food, but also lives. Food scraps were also carefully processed. They were never thrown away near the camp. All bones and scraps were either burned to ashes in a fire or carried far away from the campsite. The cooking area was also located some distance from the sleeping quarters. It was usually set up closer to the fire so that the smell of smoke would help mask the aroma of food. After the meal, all the dishes and the cooking area were thoroughly cleaned. Personal hygiene also played a role. Indigenous peoples regularly used campfire smoke to smoke their clothes and bodies. This helped to mask the natural human scent that could alert animals. They also used strong-smelling plants. Bunches of mint, wormwood, or pine needles could be carried or laid out in a shelter. These natural fragrances helped create olfactory camouflage. Hunters paid special attention to masking their scent before going out on a hunt. They would rub their bodies and clothes with pine needles or soil to make themselves less noticeable to the keen sense of smell of their prey. The same principle worked to protect them from predators. The place for relieving oneself was always located far away from the camp. This was an ironclad rule, as these odors are a powerful marker of territory and could provoke curiosity or aggression in predators. All these measures together created an olfactory cleanliness zone around the camp. This made the camp much less interesting to animals searching for food. The ability to be invisible to the predator's nose was no less important than the ability to be invisible to its eyes. But smells and sounds are only part of the picture. In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans used their knowledge of animal behavior to stay one step ahead. Native Americans possessed encyclopedic knowledge of animal behavior, which was passed down from generation to generation. This library of knowledge allowed them to predict the actions of predators and avoid dangerous situations. They understood the motivations, habits, and language of the creatures around them. They knew the daily and seasonal rhythms of animal life. They knew what time of day wolves went out to hunt and when bears were most active in search of food. This allowed them to plan their movements to minimize the risk of encountering them. They thoroughly studied the territorial behavior of predators. By marks on trees, tracks, and other signs, they could determine the boundaries of the area that a bear or wolf pack considered their own. Invading such territory without extreme necessity was considered reckless. Particular attention was paid to the behavior of indicator animals. For example, a sudden flight of a flock of crows or the alarm calls of jays could indicate the presence of a large predator nearby. These little guardians of the forest were a reliable early warning system. They understood that a well-fed predator is not a dangerous predator. After a successful hunt, wolves or bears could rest for several days without posing a threat. The ability to find the remains of a predator's prey provided valuable information about its current condition and intentions. Indigenous peoples distinguished between different types of behavior. They could tell the difference between the simple curiosity of a young animal and purposeful pursuit or territorial defense. This assessment of the situation allowed them to choose the right course of action in response. Ultimately, this allowed them to think like a predator. They could anticipate its next move and act preemptively. This ability was their main cognitive advantage in the wild. Survival in the wild was a collective effort. The safety of one person depended on the vigilance of the entire group. Therefore, social organization and a clear division of responsibilities played a key role in protecting the camp. Native Americans rarely traveled or slept alone. A group of several people created more noise and smell, which in itself scared away many animals. A predator will always prefer to attack a lone target rather than mess with a whole group. In any camp, even the smallest, night watch was organized. While the others slept, one or more people stayed awake by the fire, keeping the fire going and listening to the sounds of the night. This simple measure greatly increased safety. Those on duty took turns throughout the night so that everyone could rest. Such a system required discipline and mutual trust. Everyone understood that the lives of their comrades depended on the responsibility of the person on duty. Special attention was paid to the perimeter of the camp. Before nightfall, it was carefully inspected. The person on duty during their shift also made periodic rounds to ensure that everything was calm. There were always more experienced people in the group who taught the younger ones. Knowledge was constantly being passed on. In conversations around the campfire, during joint treks and hunting trips. Thus, centuries of survival experience were preserved. Stories and legends were also an important teaching tool. In allegorical form, they told of animal habits, the mistakes made by careless people, and the rules of behavior in the forest. These stories were more memorable than dry instructions. Thus, safety was the result not only of individual skills, but also of the coordinated work of the entire group. Everyone contributed to the common cause, creating a system of collective vigilance. It was a social fortress, its walls woven from trust and responsibility. Perhaps the most paradoxical and yet most effective tool for survival was respect. In the worldview of indigenous peoples, predators such as bears and wolves were not just animals, but powerful spiritual beings. They were treated with reverence and even fear, and this shaped a safe model of behavior. Before going hunting or on a long journey, people would perform certain rituals. They asked the spirits of the forest for permission to enter their territory and for protection from danger. This put them in a serious and respectful mood. They never provoked animals unnecessarily. If they accidentally encountered a predator, the main task was to demonstrate their peaceful intentions and give it the opportunity to leave. Looking directly into its eyes, shouting, or making sudden movements could be perceived as aggression. There were certain taboos. For example, it was forbidden to say the name of a bear aloud in the forest. Instead, allegorical names such as master or old man were used. It was believed that this could attract its attention. If a hunter had to kill a bear for the survival of the tribe, it was accompanied by complex rituals. The animal was asked for forgiveness, its spirit was appeased in every way possible, and its bones were buried with special honors. This showed that the killing was a necessary measure, not a senseless act of violence. This attitude ruled out the possibility of thoughtless and cruel hunting of predators. Native Americans did not seek to exterminate wolves or bears on their territory. They understood their role in the natural balance and recognized their right to exist. Respect was also expressed in language. In tales and legends, bears and wolves often appeared as wise mentors, ancestors, or powerful spirits with supernatural abilities. They were an important part of their cosmology, not just pests. Thus, their main weapon was not a stick or a spear, but their culture itself. It shaped behavior that made humans less visible and less confrontational in the eyes of wildlife. Respect was their invisible shield. In summary, the Native American survival system was holistic and multi-layered. It included practical skills, deep knowledge, and a strong spiritual foundation. All these elements were inextricably linked and reinforced each other. They did not survive in spite of nature, but because of it. The forest was not a hostile environment for them, but a home full of resources, clues, and allies. They knew how to use everything that nature gave them to ensure their safety. Their approach was proactive, not reactive. They did not wait for a problem to arise, but did everything possible to prevent it. Choosing a place for a camp, managing odors, sound discipline, all these were preventive measures. The key difference in their worldview was the absence of anthropocentrism. They did not consider humans to be the pinnacle of creation, entitled to do anything they wanted. They saw humans as just one thread in the complex web of life, where all are equal and interconnected. It was this view of the world that allowed them to sleep peacefully alongside the most dangerous predators on the continent. They did not violate the laws of nature, and nature, in turn, allowed them to exist. It was a fragile but effective non-aggression pact. It may be difficult for modern humans, armed with technology, to understand such a philosophy. We are used to relying on high fences, powerful weapons, and electronic security systems. We build walls between ourselves and the wild world. Native Americans did not build walls. Instead, they honed their senses, deepened their knowledge, and cultivated respect within themselves. Their protection was their own awareness and harmony with the world around them. Their experience teaches us that safety is not always the result of superior strength. Sometimes it is the result of wisdom, patience, and the ability to be part of something bigger than yourself. This is a lesson that remains relevant to this day. Their legacy is not just a set of survival techniques, it is a holistic philosophy of life in which man and nature are not enemies, but partners. It is a reminder that the most reliable home is not one built of stone, but one built of understanding and respect. We see that the survival of Native Americans was based not on brute force, but on intelligence, observation, and a deep respect for nature. Their methods are not just a set of life hacks, but a holistic system where every element, from choosing a place to sleep to treating animal spirits, played a role. They proved that the best way to win a battle is to avoid it. This experience shows us an alternative way of interacting with the wild world, a path of coexistence rather than domination. Perhaps this ancient knowledge holds the answers to many modern questions. This legacy reminds us that true strength lies in harmony, not confrontation. What topics from the lives of the indigenous peoples of North America would you like to see in future videos? Share your ideas in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the wisdom of ancient cultures.